In Ankara, for us is Zuhal Mert Uzuner, an Associate Professor of International Relations at Marmara University. Zuhal, thank you so much for your time. The Swedish government has confirmed that these new anti-terror laws do contain a provision for the security services to draw a link between sympathizers of the YPG terror group with those of the PKK terror group. How important is that? Let's just explain to the viewer that the PKK is regarded as a terror group by the United States, of course by Turkiye, also the European Union, but not necessarily the YPG. A lot of Western countries don't see the link that Ankara sees.
Yes, this issue, as you know, is a very important matter of discussion since the last year because of the rising threat coming from Russia targeting the Eastern European countries. But as we know that the Swedish, the strategic culture is a little bit different than the rest of the Europe and especially NATO member countries. Now, this law is an attempt to change this approach, to change the strategic culture of the country. But how much it is possible, it is really problematic. First of all, it is related with the definition of terrorism. As we know that terror definition is still very blurred, very unidentified when we look at international community. There is a the brief definition. This is the indiscriminate violence targeting civilians. But this is not enough because we know that the identifying several organizations or the people as terrorists, there is need for also the political will and the political decisions. And from that approach, Sweden had been always a problematic country for Turkish understanding, because we know that the PKK issue was very important discussion issue in between two countries, and after that we reached out the common memorandum. But until today, there was discussion about who are the terrorists, who are not. The counting and the time-consuming discussions could not produce any concrete result for Sweden, as different than Finland. And now we have a new era after the Turkish elections, and there is a very clear perspective for Sweden to choose a solution for the dichotomy in their strategic culture. So how much they can overcome this problem of this division in between YPG and PKK is another issue. But there are many other methods, I think. There are so many people, they are identified namely as a part of this destructive, violent activities targeting civilians. So I think if the Swedish government wants to overcome that problem, and if they want enough to be a part of the security organization, which needs cooperation, strong cooperation among the allies, then they can find a way to solve that issue, I think.
If anybody's wondering how Turkey is able to veto the application of Sweden, every single existing NATO member has to approve any new applications. So at the moment, it's Hungary and Turkey that are stopping Sweden from becoming a member. Do you think there's going to be intense pressure on Ankara to approve Stockholm's bid before that NATO summit in July in Lithuania?
Yes, there will be a pressure over Turkish government. Actually, we started to see the signs of that pressure because the U.S. government wants to change their faces towards the sources of threat. As you know, yesterday and today there is the meeting about trade and the technology cooperation in between EU and the United States. So they are in this. They discuss in the meetings the how to cope with the rising the Chinese the competition, and still there is problem in between these two actors about how to deal with this the rising threat conception. So under this atmosphere, they want to solve all the problems inside NATO or around NATO. That's why Turkey will be under pressure. But I think the Swedish government can see now that if they want to reach out a very fast result of membership, they can do very fast the progress to make the Turkish government agree and to give a little bit trust that cooperation will work properly, then there can be a progress. But it is tightly related with Swedish government's perspective. And when we look at the explanations of Swedish Prime Minister, we can see some positive signs, especially after the perspective of the US and the NATO leadership.
Zuhal, you began this interview by looking at the bigger picture, which is, of course, the war in Ukraine. So we have possibly Sweden, we definitely have Finland, and many, many members of NATO, as well as the EU, are calling for full NATO membership also for Ukraine. Increasingly, Russia appears isolated because of one man, Vladimir Putin, who said one of the reasons for launching the war in Ukraine was because he was worried about NATO's eastward expansion. And that's exactly what's happening.
When we look at the evolution of Ukrainian war, we can see that Russia is stuck now inside Ukraine, and we do not expect any kind of expansion of the threat. But how much the Russian threat is still alive from the perspective of Eastern European countries can change, of course, according to very, let's say, the sudden changes in international politics. But I think there is no so high level of emergency anymore. What is emergent is actually in other fields of activities and the US plans, US strategic plans. And from that approach, the Russian threat seems much more contained, according to me. It's not such urgent like last year. So I think the Russian threat is still there. It is existing inside NATO strategic concept, and they act accordingly. But it's not such urgent, and that may be a kind of source of negotiation at the table for and actually against Swedish the standpoint. That's why I expect the same level of pressure about Swedish government to progress more about their promises existing inside the memorandum.
Yeah, and worth saying that other NATO members, including Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, say that Turkiye's concerns are extremely legitimate because of how much it suffered from terrorist attacks. Zuhal, Mert, Uzuner, thank you so much indeed, Zuhal.